This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net and Avoid the Maze. And today I have a guest coming from, as they say, across the sea. Here I am in the United States, and Ken Kelling is in England. And, I have to tell you, Ken, when I think of England, I just picture the Queen. I know that she has since passed away, but I still picture Queen Elizabeth, you know, residing over everyone there. And I know things have changed quite a bit in England, even before she passed, but quite a bit since. But I've also noticed that we all have so much in common. And we think that just because we're from different countries, different cultures, um, we're going to be vastly different. But as I read your bio, there were so many things in there that said, yeah, like I know Ken. I may not know you, but I know someone like you, similar to you, and going through the journey that you have. So tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got from A to maybe M in the alphabet.
Okay. Okay. Well, first of all, I was laughing about your association, and it's a valid one because the royal family in the UK is hugely well known. But of course, we always laugh, as I guess you would as well, when you see kind of representations in film and TV, and if you get uh, films like Love Actually, the Richard Curtis film, and all these kinds of things, you would think that all people in England, we kind of we have tea with the Queen, and we shop in Burlington Arcade, and everything stops for high tea at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. um, which of course doesn't happen. Life is a good deal different. So there are these stereotypes out there, but
Sure.
I think when you were talking about the sort of things in common, often it is something like humor, isn't it? That can translate across different cultures and different countries. What else? Emotions, sadness, joy, all these things are, part of the human spirit. And, if we are unified by anything, perhaps it's all those things. Anyway, that was just before I started. My journey. So my career started off in communications and public relations.
Okay.
Uh, so that was a bit of media, a bit of politics, a bit of campaigning. Um, I was keen to kind of make the world a better place from a relatively young age. Um, that's with the values that I was brought up with by my parents. Was to do good, and so that's what I wanted to do initially. I guess was work on social issues, trying to make a difference to the world. But as you and everybody listening will know, organizations and working isn't always as rosy as it as you think it might be,
Right.
even even within charities or whatever else, because once human beings come together, stuff happens. So it wasn't. I didn't feel it was the kind of thing that I always wanted to do forever. And I knew that I was never going to be a politician for sure. Um, but I still had this kind of feeling that I wanted to make a difference. Um, the last kind of, I did that for about 25 years, kind of working in communications and
Yeah.
PR. The very last job that I worked on in a traditional 9 to 5 way was the Olympic Games in London in 2012. So we hosted the Olympic Games here, which was great. And I worked on the Olympic torch relay, which was all about the Olympic torch going around the country. And that was a great job, really amazing job to work on. We wanted to celebrate local people, community heroes, people
Sure.
who were at grassroots who didn't always get recognized. So That's who we wanted to run around with the flame and to be recognized. So that was great, but of course, when you finish a job like that, you basically stop, and the Olympics rolls on to Brazil, I think it was after that, and goes around the world. And so I thought, right, what do I do now? And I took some time out, and I still had this kind of sense of wanting to do something to make people happier, to make
Sure.
people to make a difference, as your show is all about. Um, but I didn't know what that was. But I knew I was a good listener, and I'd heard of this thing called coaching. And I thought, well, that might be for me, so I'll go and look into that. And then that began a journey of about 8 or 10 years or so of becoming a coach, being trained as a coach, finding out what that was, and then finding clients to work with, and just really understanding um, how lasting change can come from within us. It can come from within ourselves if we're allowed the space and the opportunity um, to find our own answers and to have some help in doing that. So that's what drew me to coaching, and I now have my own coaching business, which we'll probably go on to talk about a little. But I also train and mentor other coaches as well. In fact, this morning I was doing a 3-hour webinar all about introducing people to coaching who are thinking of becoming a coach. What does it mean? What is coaching? How does it help people? That kind of thing. So that's my life now.
I love it.
Is around that, and I specialize now in this relatively new thing called retirement coaching, which is probably what we're going to talk about a little bit today.
And I'm really interested in that because I don't know about in the UK, but here in the United States, when I was growing up, and I grew up in the 50s and 60s, everyone couldn't wait to retire. And
Yeah.
it was like, well, that's wonderful. Look at you. You get to sit on the porch and rock in your chair. You get to go to the fishing hole or you play golf. Um, and my father was forced into retirement because of his health. And he always had a hobby, but he created more hobbies to
Mm.
keep himself busy because he said, what am I going to do? If I sit in a chair and watch TV, I'm going to fall asleep. And I don't have a lot of money to go, playing golf every day or traveling. And so he found his niche. And I didn't understand it back then as much as I do today, because I too was forced into retirement about 12 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And I came home very depressed. Like, now what? I loved my job, but hated the culture.
Yeah.
And it was like, wait a second, I know what I've always wanted to do. I wanted to be in communications. That's my degree. How can I use it? And I now believe that retirement is just a word. It means that we're going to change things up a little bit.
Yeah.
So tell me what really got you into retirement coaching, because
Yeah.
most people sit back and go, oh, they've already lived their life.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's so much in what you say that I recognize. So I guess I'll answer the question with me personally, but also some wider observations, I think, because um, the short answer to me personally was me approaching my 60th birthday, um, and in my late 50s, starting to think about retirement or semi-retirement. What does that mean? But also starting to look at, how are people experiencing that as an event, and how are we thinking about this? And the one thing that I could see, and this is, I think, one of our biggest challenges, is that we tend to see retirement as a financial event, and that is what is sold to us.
Right.
It's all exactly as you say. It's about working really hard, getting enough money, and then all you need to do is sit on the porch, go and play golf, do whatever. And, for two or three kind of generations, we've sort of had this idea. It's like work, 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 stop.
Yeah.
And that's a collision for people. That's like bang, particularly where, we're living longer and we are living healthy lives for longer. So, if we have 20, 30, maybe even 40 more years of life, it's like you said, what do I do now?
Right.
And because we've been kind of sold this idea that, it's all about, as somebody described it to me, having a beer on the beach and, doing nothing, well, that's going to drive us mad, isn't it,
Yeah.
really? It's going to drive us crazy. So I think the attitude to what this event is changing. And, I think it's being questioned. I would get rid of that word altogether because I think it's too loaded. Retire. I think for many of us, it means stop working.
Right.
And that's a big shock because, like you say, people, even if they don't miss their company, they miss their colleagues, or they miss the conversation, they miss the chat, they miss the identity or the role that someone might have had. So I find this stuff really fascinating because, for me, it's I'm going through this as well. I do want to work less for sure. And I do think that's, it's a time of life to think about that. But I'm not, I'm really fit. I'm really healthy. I've got lots of energy. I'm not going to sit and watch daytime TV all day.
Right.
Um, but what I found is that there's very little kind of planning or help or support, or indeed what I call a roadmap for people to make this transition. And it can be quite a transition. I read in one survey that retirement was considered the 10th most stressful event of life.
I can believe it. Yeah.
Yeah, for these reasons. And yet all we talk about is money. All we talk about is pension. All we talk about is having enough money for retirement. So because we're so focused on that, we don't think about, what mindset do I need? What's going to be my purpose? How am I going to get my connections now? How am I going to keep my connections and my vitality? And very few of us think about that until it's smacking us in the face.
Exactly. I grew up with seeing my father's mother work late into her 60s, and she had health issues,
Mm,
but she worked at a restaurant. I think she was the hostess there, and she'd leave every day like at 4 o'clock, go to work in the evening, come home late at night, and she had so much vitality, even though during the day she may have felt sickly. There was something about that 4 o'clock. Okay, I can't feel sick because I'm going to be with people. I'm going to be doing all these fun things. And I know when she had to physically stop working, it was just taking a toll on her. She wasn't the cook at home. That was my grandfather. She wasn't the baker. And she found herself sitting in a chair,
yeah.
and every twinge she had, she thought she was having a heart attack.
Wow. Yeah.
And, you know, she lived in a different city than us. And I cannot tell you how many times my parents packed up the car and we would drive because, this is grandma's, last breath. But living through that, something clicked back then. And it was like, I don't want to just go sit on a chair. Now, there are some days, yeah, I just want to sit on the chair.
Yeah, me too.
But at the end of the day, when I put my head on my pillow, I want to say, hey, this is what I did today.
Yeah.
And it's not how many Netflix movies I've watched, you
Yeah.
know? Um, the sad part, I don't know what it's like in England, but here you get to a certain age and even if you want to take a part-time job, you're very limited, no matter what your skills are. Are you
Yeah.
seeing the same thing going on there as well?
Yeah, yeah. So I think, what's happened in the last few years, I think there's been a real growth, and I think it is led by it's a terrible name, but let's use it. A generation of baby boomers, as they get referred to.
Yep,
Um, and as that generation becomes older, they're assertive, and they're not prepared to kind of just sit down in a chair
right.
and do nothing. These are very active, very successful people. So there's a drive, I think, to combat some of these ideas that simply because you reach a certain age that you become passive and you don't do anything anymore. So there's very much a kind of a surge, and I see it in the States actually, and I see it here, of people thinking, no, I'm not going to be defined by my number. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. Um, and at the same time, and particularly here, there are quite a few campaigns to combat ageism in the workplace. And what's been interesting in the last few years with COVID is that this has really come to the foreground because when COVID was at its worst economically, the first people to be made redundant or to be let go in companies tended to be those who were 50 plus.
Right.
So they might be offered or take voluntary redundancy, for example. So what we saw was, quite a few people dropping out of the employment market because of that age that they were at. And when COVID was over and they were starting to look at economic recovery here, they didn't really know where all those people had gone.
Yeah,
And suddenly they needed a lot more of these people back in the workplace because actually they realized, do you know what? We need a workforce and we need an experienced workforce. So all of a sudden we started seeing very specific advertising campaigns for people aged over 50 about coming back
interesting.
to work and coming back into the workplace. And alongside that, I think the kind of awareness of ageism or potential ageism has really hit the spotlight at the same time. So you're getting very, very kind of assertive um, groups of people who are both encouraging people back into the workplace um, and providing all sorts of information and opportunities about that. Um, but also a sort of, I think it's an assertiveness. It's like, hey, I'm not dead in the water. I can still got a contribution to make.
Abs-
Um, and it's the one sort of ism, ageism, I think, that we're still probably not acknowledging in the way that we could do. Um, and I tackled this the other day because I don't know, are you a fan of Elton John at all? You like Elton John?
Oh, I do. Absolutely.
Yeah. So he played at Glastonbury last year, the big festival. He was the headliner, and it was you know
Sure,
it was a big deal because he's 70, whatever, 75, 78, and this was one of his kind of last tour things,
sure.
and it was great. He did an amazing concert. He was fantastic. But I did see on social media, I did see these little ageist kind of comments, and and I was replying to them saying, if this was about gender or if this was about race or something, would you still be saying those same things? Because it demonstrates a bias, um, and I think one of the kind of biases that we still have. I think that is still hasn't quite come to the fore yet. I think as something that we need to tackle. Um, And part of this is sometimes our own inner ageist, I called it, because
Right.
sometimes we can say to ourselves, can't we? Oh, I'm too old for this, or I'm too old for that. So, we can be our own ageist critic sometimes
Absolutely.
by telling ourselves, like, I'm too old for this. What rubbish. What nonsense, Look at
I
you. You're
learned,
running a
yeah,
podcast. You're doing all sorts of things. You've gone back to communication. It's just about what we tell ourselves. And
exactly. Well, and
yeah,
again, I think the younger generations, the millennials, understand this much better than the baby boomers do.
yeah,
Okay. And the baby boomers, I think, were fighting it, but we didn't start fighting it till we got faced with it. We didn't see it coming up. Um, when I decided to start coaching last spring, I had friends and relatives say to me, why are you taking on one more thing? And I said, because I love it,
yeah,
because it energizes me and it helps me become a better person.
yeah,
And they looked at me like, but you're 73 going on 74. And I said, so what difference does it make? My
yeah,
mother was 96 and a half years old, had her brain intact until she had a stroke. Nobody said she was too old to do anything. And my
yeah,
mother had a voice on her, and I loved
yeah,
it because
yeah,
it was like, don't tell me I can't do something. Now,
yeah,
there were certain things that she knew she was limited to as she got older, but then
yeah,
she found other things that she could still do and do well.
yeah,
So I have a feeling that's something that you also discuss with your clients because, you know, I've had two arm injuries, and so I don't have the range of motion that I really want in my arms, but it doesn't stop me from doing things. I find
yeah,
other ways to get around it.
yeah,
So it's not because of my age, it's because of an injury that I had many, many years ago.
yeah, yeah. And there is now a huge body of evidence and research that will absolutely show that the attitude that you have and your mindset that you have has a direct impact on your health and how long you will live. There's no doubt about that. That a positive mindset, one that still feels energized, fulfilled, feel that we have a meaning and a purpose in life, we will live longer. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So it's not just about the frailties of our physiology. It's about how we deal with them, like you say, and how you respond and react to them. Um, but I think, just to take an example of someone I was having a conversation with, about staying engaged and staying engaged with work. This is a client who's a very successful lawyer, and I think he's retired a couple of times, but he keeps coming back.
Sure,
Um, but what the challenge that he and others have, um, is one of, um, their own perception. How will they be perceived? Because he doesn't want to be seen as what he calls yesterday's man,
got it.
or the ghost of Christmas past, or something like that. So he's worried about, if he's still involved in work, how will he be seen? But he's equally still so passionate about what he does that he really wants to stay engaged, but perhaps this time on his own terms. And I think it's just illustrative of where our thinking gets to. Because, like I say, we can be a little bit ageist to ourselves. And he's 74 and he's just written a 12,000 word article. And I'm like, fantastic, absolutely brilliant. So he's staying engaged in work, but maybe now it's in a different way and it's on his own terms, because God knows he deserves it, and he's built a career that should allow him to do it on his own terms.
I like using the word that we are evolving rather than aging because some of the things that I do today, I never thought I would do or would do well, um, because of my mindset when I was younger.
Mm,
And now I look at it as, what do I really have to lose? I don't have a
yeah.
lot to lose. I have a lot to gain. And I discuss it with my husband a lot because I have many, many interests. He has very few, but he knows working full time is so important for him because
Yeah.
those 8 hours at work, he's using his brain, he's totally engaged. He doesn't think of, where he is on the spectrum of life.
Mm,
He is, he's living life fully. Yeah, there are times when he gets home being exhausted. The first thing he'll say is, "Oh, I don't know how much longer I can do this." And it's like, but you don't have to think about that. You
yeah.
keep doing it. And he does change some of his patterns to make it even easier to keep doing it. So,
Yeah.
for people like you said who are out there saying, I'm too old, I can't do it, I can't change. You're right, it's a mindset. If we keep saying no or I can't, it'll never happen.
Yeah. I got, you know what, there's something that I don't know how you feel about this, but there's something that annoys me a little bit sometimes when people will say something like, well, today it's all about social media and I don't know anything about that. And, I can't do it. Social media, like anything else, is just about knowledge and practice and doing it. There's no great mystery to this whole thing. You've set up a podcast, you set up a YouTube channel, you've done all these things, but
Right.
it's simply because you've decided to learn how to do them. So I don't think there's really any excuse for finding something that you like to do, even if um, everybody in the world is telling you, oh, but you don't know anything about social media or the internet. Well, learn.
Yeah,
It's only the same as what you've done throughout your life is
exactly.
to learn something, and so don't be afraid of it. Kind of embrace it, and if it's just one thing that you do, it's
Yeah,
great because
it's
I think
interesting. Yeah.
if there's any advantage, I think of getting older. I don't know what you think, but if there's one advantage, it's that I don't care what people think about me anymore.
Right. That is an advantage. You know, um, I met my husband um in my early 30s. And when I met him, he said we had been dating on and off, and he said he was in the photo industry. He said, I have a photo show this weekend. Would you like to meet me in Pittsburgh? And it was like the only thing I knew about photography, was snap and shoot. And he was in the darkroom industry. I had no idea what a darkroom was or anything else. Anyways, um, I went and I was standing behind the table with him, and he showed me this little piece of plastic with all these colors on it. And he said, I'm going to describe this to you. And if somebody comes up to the table, you can show it to them. He said, this is called a subtractive calculator, and it's used in the dark room to identify colors. He gave me some more information. Next thing I know, somebody came up to the table. It's all I talked about for 2 days. He went into his dealer on Monday. He said, I need 1,000. He said, what do you mean you need 1,000? You've never ordered more than 10. He said, I don't know what you did this weekend. Everybody's calling for them. And all I knew were the words at the time.
Now,
But then it was like, okay, now take me into the dark room, show me how this is used.
yeah,
Um, if you would have told me that would have been interested, I would have said no. But when you get introduced to things, sometimes it's just like that spark that says, okay, teach me more. Over the last 30 years, the two of us have been doing wedding photography. I don't know, I don't just snap and shoot anymore. I
yeah,
frame a picture. But
yeah,
that's because I got interested, you showed me. And there are some people that say, like, you're climbing all around taking pictures. Yeah, I am.
Mm.
I can do it when I'm doing photography. When I'm cleaning the house, that's a different story.
Yeah, the motivation's there, isn't it?
Right.
Isn't it? I love that because it's amazing how much we might hold ourselves back sometimes. And we always expect to kind of be an expert in something before we do it. Or, and as you all know, the best way to learn is simply to do it. And, if you can get over these sort of fears of not doing something perfectly, or being laughed at, or whatever, and just do it, then like you've experienced, you get that evidence of success back, and you go, oh, who would have
Absolutely.
imagined it? But this
I
is
mean,
what
as a
happened.
child, I was always afraid somebody was going to make fun of me.
Yeah.
Okay. But again, you know, the words of my parents saying, why don't you laugh first?
Oh yeah,
Because it
nice.
takes the power away from them. And
Yeah.
really, when I experience something new that I want to try, I will be the one, I might even post on social media. Okay, I tried changing the spark plugs in my car. I took them out. I have no idea how to put them back in, and my car's not going to run. And it's like, okay. And then I start realizing, well, they've got to be put back in. So you better figure it out. And sometimes you have to call for help, and
Yeah.
sometimes you're going to Google it, and sometimes you're just going to do it by process of elimination.
Mm.
And I love that I'm able to do that. And I'm hoping more people, young and as they get older, will continue to realize that making mistakes is what makes us smarter.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Somebody asked me on another interview what advice I would have for younger people about retirement, and I was I didn't have a ready answer for that, but the what I did talk about was um, how it seems that younger people these days have a much greater sense of looking for work that's fulfilling and purposeful. And I'm not sure that I ever had that at the same age. And I see young people, will be very kind of clear on who they want to work for and who they don't want to work for. Um,
Absolutely.
and if that means, the opportunity to earn less money, or have less things, quite often they're prepared for that, because they're very engaged in other important issues that they want to be involved with. And I
Right.
think that's wonderful. And I think in in terms of retirement, all I can think of is if you keep that sense of engagement and involvement throughout your career, then you'll probably continue that past this thing called retirement age. And you'll look back on your life, thinking, yeah, I really stuck to what I wanted to do. And although, like I was saying at the beginning, we nearly always talk about finances and money and pensions and having enough money, um, maybe, and that is important, but maybe we can also think, how do I stay fulfilled and engaged and purposeful throughout my working career and throughout my working life as well? Because I strongly believe that's what carries us through past this, false kind of age of,
Y-
60,
You
65,
know,
whatever it is.
it's interesting how you describe that because our youngest son, very sports minded, wanted to be working in sports, um, got a job with the the Cleveland Guardians and worked for them, but he wasn't making enough to be on his own. And but you could see that he loved going to work, loved doing what he did, loved interacting with people. And we just said to him, you can live at home as long as you need to, because we saw fulfillment in him that my husband and I didn't get until later in life.
Yeah.
And a year ago, he moved to Dallas, Texas, and he's working for another sport team. And he said, I don't need all those things I thought I needed in life.
Mm.
I have a wonderful work culture. I love what I'm doing. I'm growing. And he said, and someday maybe I'll still be there, but maybe I'll be somewhere else. But he knows what he needs to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
And, I thought growing up that to be fulfilled meant I had to get married and have a family and do all those traditional things. I'm not saying it was a bad thing, but I didn't think about myself
Yeah.
for the first 50 years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that can be dangerous, but my parents were great role models. And so I said, okay, I may be 50, but now I'm going to start living.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. One of the things that I talk to my clients about, who are kind of reaching retirement or retired, is I talk about the three A's, and the three A's for me are adapt, adjust, and accept. So what is it that you might need to adapt in terms of your experience before? What might need to adjust? But I think the third one, accept what might you need to accept, is probably the most important one, because in this stage of life, maybe we need to accept certain things. Maybe we need to accept we didn't always, make the right decisions, or we didn't always have the career that we wanted, or, we now realize we could have been doing something different. And we can't change that always. So we may need to accept that and just decide, okay, but I've still got 20, 30 years. What have I learned that I now want to take forward? So, it can be a great time of reflection, for about, what you want from the future, but also, how you've got to where you are in the past as well.
Well, it helps us look at each day as, it really is a gift. And that's how I wake up every day. Yeah, I may have more aches and pains than I did when I was in my 20s, but they do go away once I start doing the things that make me feel good and give me that purpose. And we all
Yeah,
have a purpose. And I think once we allow ourselves to find it, we can do just about anything that we want.
I agree. It's taken me this long to start putting some music out on Spotify. So, I'm writing music, I'm putting things out, and I've always wanted to do it. I did it when I was younger, then I stopped doing it for 20 years. And, perhaps I stopped doing it because of, you know, I might have said it was time, but maybe it was fear. Maybe I didn't want to kind of put myself out there. Maybe I don't know what it is. But now, why not? Let's just do it. So I loved what you said about going back to communication. I think sometimes we do go back to, what was it that we originally thought?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, how can my listeners find you, or if they want
Yeah,
to connect with you, maybe you're the coach that they're looking for.
sure. So I have a website which is called senseofpurpose.co.uk. That's senseofpurpose.co.uk. So there's plenty about me on that website. I'm also on LinkedIn. So I'm Ken Kelling on LinkedIn. That's an easy way to find me. And I kind of write articles and different posts on LinkedIn quite frequently. Or people can just email me. It's a very simple email address. It's ken@senseofpurpose.co.uk.
And we'll put all that in the show notes. So if you didn't catch it, just go back, read the show notes. It'll be there. Show notes are both going to be in Zoom and on our audio links. And Ken, thank you so much for joining me today. You see, it's cold in England, Do you have
Mhm.
snow?
We've had a little bit of snow, but not as much as you by the sound of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and again, I have to tell our listeners where I am in Northeast Ohio, I'm don't have a lot of snow, but just about 20 miles north of us. They're not going anywhere today. They're snowed in. So
Yeah.
I loved everybody today. And remember, you're never too old to keep living.
Mhm.
Thank you, Ken. Have a
Thank you
great
so much.
day.
Thank
Bye-bye
you.
now.
Bye.